Vice President Biden today criticizing Donald Trump while traveling overseas. The vice president in Latvia reinforcing support for our NATO allies facing the prospect of Russian aggression, telling leaders not to take Trump seriously whatsoever at all.
Despite what you hear in this heated political season, there is a wide, deep, bipartisan commitment to NATO in my country. Don't listen to that other fellow. He knows not of what he speaks. With Russia once more taking aggressive actions and threatening the sovereign rights of its neighbors, NATO remains as vital today as it ever has been.
Well, joining me now to assess, Stephen Cohen, Professor Emeritus of Russian Studies at Princeton and New York University. Professor, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbs.
It's always, Lou, if you will, please. It is always stunning to hear a politician of either party criticizing folks back home, but particularly being so dismissive as was Vice President Biden. Even by Biden's standards, that was a bit much, don't you think?
Well, considering the foreign policy problems Biden has brought us, and the fact that he doesn't want us to hear Trump's alternative policies, and I say that not as a supporter of Donald Trump, but as a patriot of American national security, our relationship with Russia is worse than it was when I was a young man, and it's getting more dangerous. Trump seems to understand this and says he wants to get out of this new Cold War to what we used to call a détente with Russia. I think that would make us safer. The problem is instead of engaging Trump, arguing with him, they call him names like client of the Kremlin, which is preposterous. So they're preventing the discussion that I think we have to have for our own national security.
The Democrats are in this race marginalizing, trying to trivialize Trump, mocking him at every opportunity. But in point of fact, when he said that he would like to see a rebalancing of NATO, an articulation of a rational policy and strategy for the United States, i.e. one that aligns our interest with the mission of NATO, a lot of scholars and foreign policy experts lined up with him. I don't quite understand why the national media is operating as if none of that occurred and put in context what Trump said.
Well, let's have a little memory here. Since the end of the Soviet Union, almost exactly 25 years ago, policy wonks in Washington of both parties have been saying, what's the mission of NATO? And the only mission we have observed is expanding to Russia's borders. Mm-hmm. And Trump has said, well, why has it done that? Why isn't it fighting terrorism? Maybe he's wrong, but why not debate that? I correct one thing you said, mm-hmm. Lou. It's been a galaxy of Republican former national security advisors who have also denounced Trump, mm-hmm. saying they won't support him. My guess is because he's not going to give him a job. But the point is that this is a bipartisan shutdown or a boycott of discussing what Trump has to say. If Trump's wrong, let's demonstrate it with an argument rather than calling these McCarthyite names.
Yeah, it's a McCarthyite-like response from either this administration or the establishment, whether it be the political establishment, the economic establishment, foreign policy establishment, as they respond to the man who is running for president against the establishment. And as you know, the further we get into this campaign, the more I think people are realizing, you know, there is such an orthodoxy that is ossified around ideas, concepts, and behavior by our nation that it's a good thing that he is providing the service, because much of it is irrational. For example, our policy in Europe doesn't make a lot of sense right now. And the behavior of our allies within NATO is not necessarily rational, and it hasn't done particularly well in forestalling Vladimir Putin.
Well, consider something else that he said, for which he was denounced. He said he favored an alliance with Russia against the Islamic State in Syria, correct? He said that repeatedly.
Yep.
He was denounced for that. But the reality is Obama has been trying to negotiate that with Putin for about 2 months. And they had a deal, and the opposition in Washington seems to have broken it. So in that sense, Trump actually, on this one issue, had allied himself with Obama. But you don't know that because we're not permitted to discuss it. The same is true with this accusation that at the Republican convention, he took out of the party platform something was favorable to Russia. Maybe that's so, but what he did was adopt Obama's position of not sending more weapons to Kiev, which has been Obama's position for 2 years. So if you're going to denounce Trump, and you think that's a wrong policy, the Democrats should be denouncing Obama too. In other words, this is the kind of thing you and I would have in a discussion, but we can't get the discussion going.
Yeah, and on another point, it was only a matter of days after Donald Trump had been talking about aligning NATO against the threat of radical Islamist terrorists, that suddenly the Obama administration national security folks started talking about precisely the same thing. So he is having an impact across the board.
He is. Yeah.
Stephen Cohen, it's great to have you with us. Come back soon, will you?
Thank you.
Thanks so much.